Imagine walking into a restaurant and seeing a man brazenly insulting one of the greatest fighters of all time, expecting to provoke him into a fight. But what happens next causes the entire room to freeze in stunned silence. This is not just any fighter. This is Khabib Nurmagomedov, a man known for his discipline, humility, and unwavering principles. When challenged in a way that would make most people cry, Khabib's response was not what was expected. It was something much more powerful. Stay tuned, because this moment will forever change your perception of true power. Stay tuned as we take you through this unforgettable encounter that will remind you why true strength lies not in power or status, but in standing up for those who need it most. You won't believe Khabib's reaction. It's something that will stay with you long after you hear this story. If you like stories that inspire and touch you, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel to see even more powerful content. It was a luxurious evening at one of Dubai's most prestigious restaurants, a place where the rich and famous dined in elegance, surrounded by the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of fine china. The aroma of freshly grilled meats and exotic spices filled the air, while golden chandeliers cast a warm glow on the pristine white tablecloths. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved gracefully between tables, serving exquisite dishes too. The restaurant was an oasis of sophistication, where respect and discretion were expected of everyone who entered. Among the guests that night was Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undefeated UFC champion, a man whose reputation stretched far beyond the octagon. Unlike many fighters basking in glory, Khabib was different. He built his legacy not only on his sterling reputation, but also on his unwavering discipline, humility, and deeply held values. He never sought attention or flaunted his wealth or status. Dressed in his usual simple clothes, he would sit at a corner table with a few close friends, enjoying a quiet eating. His demeanor was calm, his posture relaxed as he sipped tea and engaged in light conversation. Despite being one of the most dominant athletes in the world, Khabib was known for his modesty. Fans who recognized him would approach him with admiration, asking for a photo, or simply expressing their respect. Khabib, always a gentleman, greeted them with a warm nod or handshake, never turning away a sincere fan. The atmosphere around him was serene, reflecting his reserved personality. However, not everyone in the restaurant that night shared the same level of respect. Across the room, an imposing-looking man sat at a table surrounded by a small group of people. His voice louder than the others, his mannerisms exaggerated. He was well-dressed, but acted with an arrogance that suggested he enjoyed being the center of attention. The moment he noticed Khabib, a smirk played on his lips, and an idea came to his intoxicated mind, one that would soon disrupt the peaceful atmosphere of the restaurant. With a loud, mocking laugh, he leaned back in his chair and spoke loud enough to be heard by the entire restaurant. "Well, well, 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 isn't that what it's called? Eagle of Dagestan? The undefeated champion? Or should I say, the man who ran away from the fight before anyone could expose him?" His voice oozed sarcasm, and several of his comrades chuckled nervously, unsure if they should encourage his taunts. The comment cut through the air like a knife, instantly drawing the attention of nearby visitors. Some quietly eyed, recognizing the deliberate insult, while others exchanged wary glances, wondering if they were about to witness a confrontation. Khabib, who was just sipping his tea, froze for a moment, but showed no immediate reaction. The man, encouraged by the silence, continued, "What's the point of all this training, all this discipline, if you're just going to give up at the top? True warriors don't retire when the going gets tough. They fight until they can't stand anymore." His words became more venomous. His tone was infused with provocation. The restaurant, which had once been full of pleasant chatter, was now ominously quiet. All eyes were fixed on Khabib. His friends fidgeted in their seats, their faces darkened. It was clear they were uncomfortable, perhaps even angry for him. After all, this was Khabib Nurmagomedov, a man who dominated some of the greatest fighters in history, who never backed down in the face of a challenge. To see him disrespected so openly was shocking. But Khabib didn't react, not with anger, not with annoyance, not even a glance in the man's direction. He simply set his cup back on the table, exhaling quietly as if he hadn't just been insulted in front of the entire room. His calmness was unnerving. The restaurant guests watched in stunned silence, waiting to see what the undefeated champion would do next. The arrogant man, feeling that he had the restaurant's full attention, stuck out his chest and smirked, convinced that his taunts had made an impression. His loud, mocking laughter echoed through the room as he took a slow, exaggerated sip of his drink, savoring his own bravado. The people at his table squirmed awkwardly, realizing that his antics went beyond mere banter. Some of them exchanged hesitant glances, silently urging him to stop before things got out of hand. But the man was too intoxicated with his own ego to notice. He clinked his glass on the table and stood up, adjusting his expensive suit before striding confidently toward Khabib's table. His heavy footsteps echoed across the polished marble floor, each step imbued with arrogance. His comrades muttered him, some leaning over to whisper to each other. They had seen Khabib's fights. They knew that provoking this man was the last thing anyone with common sense would do. And yet, here was their foolish friend, fueled by liquid courage, about to make a mistake he would never forget. As he approached Khabib's desk, he placed both hands on the edge and leaned over. His smirk grew wider as he spoke in a condescending tone. "So tell me, champ, how does it feel run away from a challenge? You talk so much about honor, about respect, but once you're on top, you walk away. That's no way for a warrior to." Khabib, who was quietly enjoying his meal, did not immediately look up. He continued to chew his food calmly and leisurely, as if the man's words never reached him. That only seemed to fuel the instigator's arrogance. He wanted to see the anger, to witness even the slightest reaction. But Khabib gave him nothing. The man grinned and straightened, now addressing entire restaurant, as if trying to rally the audience. What kind of fighter retires at the peak of his career? You knew someone was coming for you. You. That's why you left. You wanted to protect your precious undefeated record, because deep down, you knew your time up. He laughed mockingly, looking around as if expecting others to join in. The room was quiet. No one was laughing with him. Khabib finally put down his fork slowly and wiped his hands with the napkin beside his plate. He up, his deep brown eyes fixed on the man's face with an expression so hard, so impenetrable, that it sent a chill through the air. He said nothing. He did not frown or scowl. His face remained as calm as ever, but his presence alone was enough to make the man's smug demeanor waver for just a second. But unwilling to back down, the man intensified his insults. What, no words? No fight? I guess you're not so tough outside the cage. He grinned, but this time he lacked his former confidence. An uneasiness was growing deep in his belly, though he didn't dare admit it. Khabib's fingers tapped lightly on the table for a moment, his mind weighing the situation. And then, in a voice steady but carrying an unwavering depth, he finally answered. "I didn't leave because I was afraid," Khabib said, in a quiet but unwavering tone. "I left because I made a promise to my mother after my father died." The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. The weight of his words filled the air like a heavy fog, settling deeply into the hearts of those who heard them. The expression on the once arrogant man's face trembled, his grin twitched, his shoulders tensed. He had expected a fight, a confrontation, perhaps even a violent response, but this he did not expect. Khabib continued, and his voice didn't waver. "My father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, was more than just my coach. He was my teacher, my guide, my protector. He molded me into the fighter I became. He was there for me in every struggle, in every victory. He was someone who shaped my discipline, my faith, my whole way of life. And when I lost him, I lost a part of myself. A heavy silence hung in the air. Everything in the restaurant, from the waiters to the guests, listened with quiet reverence. It wasn't just an answer. It was a deeply personal truth that pierced arrogance like a blade. Khabib exhaled slowly, his hands resting gently on the table. Before my last fight, my mom looked me in the eye and asked me just one thing. She said, "Khabib, please. Without your father, I don't want you to fight anymore." And I promised her. I promised her that I would honor my father's legacy not by continuing to fight, but by walking away undefeated, untouched. A lump formed in the arrogant man's throat. His smugness was completely gone. In its place was something else. Shame, perhaps even regret. He had insulted Khabib, never realizing the depth of what had happened in his life. He'd called him a coward, mocked his decision to resign, all without knowing the real reason for it. Khabib reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crisp bills. Without taking his eyes off them, he carefully placed them on the table in front of the man. "This is for your food," he said with quiet strength. "Eat, sit, and be." There was a heavy silence. The man, once full of bravado, now stood motionless. His mouth was slightly open, as if he were trying to formulate words, but there was nothing to say. Khabib had not only refused to give in to provocation, he had left him with a lesson he would never forget. The restaurant guests who had been preparing for the explosion were now witnessing much deeper. A few exchanged admiring glances, some even nodded in approval. The tension that had filled the room began to subside, replaced by a quiet sense of awe. Khabib, calm as ever, pushed back his chair, adjusted his jacket, and prepared to leave. The undefeated champion responded not with his fists, but with something much more powerful: grace. As Khabib rose from his seat, adjusting his jacket with quiet calm, the once arrogant man remained frozen in place. His hands, which had once rested so confidently on Khabib's desk, now trembled slightly. His face, which only moments ago had been full of arrogance, was devoid of the colors. He had expected a confrontation, maybe even a verbal sparring match where he could prove his wit. But instead he got something much more powerful: humility. The gravity of Khabib's words hung in the air, pressing down on the man like an invisible force. He had insulted the legend, not understanding his ways. He had mocked the warrior's decision, unaware of the pain behind it. And now, standing there, he felt the crushing realization of his own ignorance. His lips opened slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. The restaurant remained ominously quiet, all eyes still on Khabib. The few guests who had been watching intently exchanged quiet nods of respect. Some of them had followed Khabib's career and witnessed his dominance in the cage. But tonight they saw something more: his character. This was a man who had built his entire life on discipline, respect, and faith. And now, when faced with insult and provocation, he demonstrated what true strength looks like. As Khabib turned to leave, the older man sitting next to him, who had remained a silent observer throughout the ordeal, slowly placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head slightly in respect. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. He wasn't just acknowledging Khabib's accomplishments in the cage. He was honoring the man's integrity. The arrogant man finally found his voice, though it was quieter now, devoid of any bravado. "Yeah, I didn't know," he muttered. His gaze darted between the untouched bills on the table and Khabib's receding figure. His words were barely louder than a whisper, but there was genuine regret in them. Khabib, who had just reached the entrance to the restaurant, stopped for a moment. Without turning around, he simply said, "Now you do it." With those words, he stepped out into the cool night air and disappeared into the quiet streets. leaving behind a room full of people who had just witnessed something truly unforgettable. The man, now sitting down again, stared at his untouched drink, his hands restlessly. He had entered this restaurant full of arrogance, eager to prove something to himself or to others. But instead, he had been humiliated in a way he had never been before could have imagined. As the evening wore on, the energy in the restaurant slowly returned to normal, but something had changed. The people who witnessed the exchange will not forget this night. They will remember Khabib's unwavering calm, his quiet wisdom, and the way he handled disrespect not with anger, but with dignity. Somewhere in the restaurant, a young boy who was watching with wide-open eyes turned to his father and whispered, "This is what a real champion looks like, isn't it?" The father, still digesting what he had seen, simply nodded. "Yes, son, that's exactly what a real champion looks like." And in that moment, it was clear to everyone. Khabib Nurmagomedov is invincible, not only in the cage, but also in life. As Khabib walked out of the restaurant into the quiet night, the weight of his own words settled inside him. He didn't need applause or affirmation. He didn't need to look back to see the impact of what had just happened. He had lived his life by a strict code of discipline, respect, and honor, values instilled in him by his father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. And tonight, he upheld them again. Inside the restaurant, the once arrogant man remained seated, replaying the moment over and over in his head. He had come to the altercation hoping to make Khabib look like a coward, but instead he had been humiliated in a way he never expected. He mocked a man who had given up everything, not for fame, not money, but for something much bigger, a promise made to a grieving mother, a promise that honored his father's legacy. And as he sat there, looking at the untouched money Khabib had left on the table, he realized the bitter truth. He'd been a fool all along. The other guests, still in awe of what they had seen, whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads in bewilderment. Others nodded with admiration. Some were even ashamed that they had even for a second accepted the words of an arrogant man. But what stood out the most was the lesson Khabib left behind, the lesson of true strength. Strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's not about proving yourself to others. Strength is about discipline. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Strength is honoring your word, sticking to your principles, and never compromising your integrity, regardless of the situation. Khabib had every reason to respond with anger, to put the man in his place with a sharp response or even a show of force. But he didn't, because true champions don't stoop to the level of their critics. The boy, who had been watching all this time, turned to his father again. His eyes were full of admiration. "Dad," he asked, "why did Khabib just walk away?" His father smiled, his own heart filled with a new respect for the undefeated champion. "Son," he said, "true warriors don't fight for ego. They fight for something bigger, and Khabib already won a long time ago." As the night went on, the story of what happened in that restaurant spread beyond its walls. People were talking about it, telling how Khabib Nurmagomedov once again proved that he was different. He was more than just a fighter. He was a man of principle, a man of honor, and above all, a man who kept his promises. And for those who truly understood his journey, they knew one thing for sure. Khabib's greatest victory wasn't inside the octagon. It was in the way he lived his life, undefeated in the only battle that truly mattered, a battle of character. Battle of character. Battle of character.